Okay, so today we are going to cover class number 11. So we're almost done. We only have two more to go after today. So almost there. So for those of you that have been consistent, you're going to get your certification at the end. So that's very exciting. And today specifically, we're going to be talking about the 7 habits of highly effective people. So this is a book written by Stephen Covey, and it is a book that I suggest for everybody to read, especially if you're in a leadership position or aspire to be in a leadership position. And really, like anybody could read this book because it's extremely valuable. Now, I'm not going to go deep into it because I do believe that as homework, if you have not read it, you should read it. We're going to cover just the basic fundamental principles of the book that can help you guys out for, when you're in a leadership position. And for those of you that have read it, this should be a refresher. What I've noticed is that sometimes when we read a good book, and we're excited about it, we find things that we like, we apply them for a couple of weeks, and then we forget about it and we go back to our old habits. And so I remember when my team read this, everybody was really excited. I saw them put it into practice for a couple of months. But then again, everybody fell back to their old habits. And so hopefully this is a refresher for those of you that read the book. And maybe this will inspire you to, go back and start practicing the 7 habits once again. So this is the book. If you have not seen it, this is how it looks like. You can get it on Amazon. I have a few copies here in the office, so if you want, I can, get you a book. All right, so Mr. Covey postulates that true success is more than just achieving wealth or fame. Instead, it needs personal growth and fulfillment. So paradigms, and I'm sure you remember when we talked about leadership paradigms. So paradigms are models for perception and understanding that shape how we view and interact with the world. So the way I like to refer to them is like the lenses. Remember, like I've given you examples in the past where I've said that the paradigm is like a lens and you see the world through that lens. And so depending on your lens, your reality is going to be different from somebody else's. So these are the paradigms. So the author argues that a paradigm shift is necessary to cultivate effective habits, especially a change from a mindset of scarcity and victimhood to one of abundance and responsibility. So basically, you have to create a shift. It's not just forcing yourself to do something for a little bit, because then what happens is that you don't create permanent change. An example of this is like when you do a diet, right? You want to lose weight, you want to lose, let's say, 10 pounds, and so you do a diet, you lose a couple of pounds, and then obviously you're not going to do a diet forever. So when you go back to your normal eating habits, you gain all your weight back. Why? Diets don't work. Why they don't work? Because you're not really changing anything. You're doing a temporary fix and you're not changing. When you do a paradigm shift, it's when you establish a habit that is forever. So, for example, in my case, I pray to God so many times. I would say, God, please make me like salads. I want to like salads. I don't want to like rice or beans, just salads. And it was very hard. I love food. So it was very hard for me. I did a million diets and they never worked. It was only when I shifted my paradigm and I said, okay, I need to change my eating habits. And I created a new lifestyle for me. So now, for those of you that know me, I try to limit my carbs. So I eat low carb and it's my lifestyle. So when people tell me, oh, you're in a diet, I'm like, no, this is the way I eat. So I had to change my mindset. Like, this is not something that I'm going to do for a couple of months because I want to look good for a wedding or an event. This is my lifestyle for now on forever. This is the way I eat moving forward. This is, you know, how I look at nutrition. This is it. And it was only then that I was able to achieve my goals, with the weight and all of that. So again, you need to change that mindset, that, your paradigm. You need to change it. It's not just doing something for a little bit, because then it's not really going to work. So this is what the book mainly talks about. So principles. Covey defines principles as fundamental truth that must be lived and internalized to achieve long-lasting success. He identifies several principles that he believes are essential for personal effectiveness. And these are integrity, courage, patience, persistence, humility, empathy, synergy, and continuous learning. So it's pretty much what your values are, what you live your life according to these principles or these values. That's why it's so important to understand what your core values are. And we talked about many times how you should align your core values to whatever you do so you can be fulfilled. So he also talks about character ethics versus personality ethics. And pretty much before the 1920s, people used to focus a lot on character ethics, and that included principles like integrity, humility, and courage. So those were the things that people focused the most. And then after the 1920s, there was a shift when it went from the character ethics to the personality ethics. And what that is that people focus a lot on public image, attitude, and personality. So, to bring about genuine and lasting change, we need to undergo a paradigm shift, which means changing your fundamental beliefs, assumptions, and values rather than merely modifying your attitudes and behavior on the surface level. So, again, modifying something at the surface, it just doesn't, people are not going to see you as genuine. We talked about leadership credibility in the past. So, if you want that change to be forever, you have to change your paradigm, like the example I gave you with the diet. So that's why we have the 7 habits. The 7 habits will help you make that paradigm shift. And these are the 7 habits. So we have be proactive. And this focus on things you can change and influence rather than reacting to external events. Then we have number 2, which is begin with the end in mind. And it defines clear personal and professional goals, understand your personal mission and what you want to achieve in life. The number 3 is put first things first, which prioritize tasks based on importance, not urgency. Focus on what contributes to your goals and values. Then we have think win-win, seek mutually beneficial solutions in interactions, adopt a mindset of abundance where there's enough success for everyone. We have number 5, which is my favorite, seek first to understand, then be understood. And this one is to listen empathetically to truly understand others before trying to make your point. Then we have synergize, which is collaborate with others, recognize and value difference in perspective to create better solutions than what you could achieve individually. And then finally, we have sharpen the saw. It's regularly renew and improve yourself in 4 areas: physical, social, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And this helps maintain and increase effectiveness. So we're going to go into detail in each habit. This diagram kind of helps you understand what these habits kind of do. So we have 3 categories. We have a private victory, and in that category, you have habits 1 to 3. Then you have public victories, which are habits 4 to 6. And then finally, you have habit 7 in the renewal category. So, habit number 1, be proactive. So proactive people take the initiative. They act instead of being acted upon. Being proactive means taking radical responsibility for your problems instead of giving energy to circumstances and things beyond your control. So take responsibility for your life and decisions and focus on what you can control. Proactive people choose how to respond to a given situation. Reactive people focus on the things they cannot control and cultivate a negative narrative or victimhood. Practice proactivity by making commitments to yourself and sticking to them. So we talk about all the time about being productive, proactive, I'm sorry, about not being reactive. We always say that when you're reactive, you're putting out fires, and when you're proactive, you're actually planning. But it also deals with how you react to certain things. If you focus on the things that you can control, then you are proactive. But if you focus on the things that you cannot control, that means that you are not proactive. So, for example, if you have an upset client calling you, right? People tend to focus on the fact that the client is upset, that the client is screaming, that the client is rude, or whatever the issue might be, instead of focusing on what you can control. I cannot control whether the client screams at me or not. I can't control that, but I can control the way I communicate with the client, the information I give to the client, the education I give to the client. So you see, it what you put your focus in determines whether you're being proactive or not. So this is a little diagram that talks about the circle of concern and the circle of influence. So to be proactive, we must focus on the circle of influence, which is the peach color. Within our circle of concern, the circle of concern is the orange one. In other words, we must work on the things we can do something about. So the positive energy um, enlarges the circle of influence. So when, when you say, okay, I'm going to concentrate on the things I can control, and you're positive about it, then that enlarges your circle of influence. But in the other hand, reactive people focus on things in their circle of concern and not in the circle of influence, which leads to blaming external factors, emanating negative energy, and causing the circle of influence to shrink. So we all know this kind of people. It's never my fault, it's always everybody else. Oh, you didn't meet your KPIs with the amount of PVPs that you needed to submit. Oh, it's not my fault. It's the clients. They're not treating. All my clients are slow treaters. We're blaming it on the client. But you can instead focus on, let me educate the client on how important being consistent with treatment is, and making sure there's no gap in treatments, and they're, going every single week like the doctor recommended. You see the difference when you focus your attention on the right thing, you can be proactive. So the key lessons, aka your homework. So I'm gonna give you homework for every single habit. Okay. So I'll send you the PowerPoint at the end, but just, you don't have to take notes now, but I really want you to practice this. I really want you to do the homework. So for this one, for habit number one, challenge yourself to test the principle of proactivity by doing the following. Replace reactive language with proactive language. So instead of saying, oh, this person makes me so mad, just say, I control my own feelings, and try to convert the reactive tasks into proactive ones. Remember, proactive tasks are the ones that you plan. Reactive ones are the ones that, when you're putting out the fires. So try to make that shift. And when when somebody is pissing you off, when somebody's making you upset, this is what I try to say. It's not easy, by the way. This is not easy. When somebody is mad and upset, I just say, I'm not going to let this person steal my peace. Not today. So start practicing that. I cannot control people. Maybe you had a bad day. Maybe you had a fight with your spouse, and then you come to the office and you're screaming at people, you're being rude or whatever. That's not an excuse. You should not do that. But we are human, okay? So instead of me like getting upset and hurt and, concentrating on the way you're acting, I'm just going to say, you know what? I'm not going to let this person take my peace. I'm going to do me. So practice that. Now, habit number two, begin with the end in mind. Imagine your funeral. I know, weird, right? Yes, it's weird. How do you want to be remembered? Think about that. What would you like your friends and family to say about you? So recently, I went to a spiritual retreat. It was an activity we did in church. And I remember that they were asking me, what would you like to see in your tombstone, when you die? If you could choose the words, because I always thought I was, peculiar. like the what they write, and I always say, how do they choose these things? You know how they say beloved mother and wife or whatever. And I was always curious as a little girl, um, like how people come up with these things. You know what I mean? Like who writes this? Like is it a person? Like do you choose it for yourself? I don't know. But I always thought that was interesting. But think for a moment, if you could actually pick those words, if you had control over what's going to be in your tombstone, what would that be? What would you like that to be? So let's say, for me, if I wanted to say, um, beloved mother and wife, whatever, I want to, well, first of all, I need to get myself some kids because I'm not going to be a beloved mother if I don't have kids, right? I have to make sure that I have a good marriage and I'm nice to my husband because if not, how can they put that, right? So the the idea here is when you know what the end is, you can actually take the steps to make that happen. So stay with me for a moment. We can do this with everything, with goals that we have in life, with tasks, with relationships. So when you picture what that end goal is, you can do, you can actually take the steps and you can actually create a plan to get there. So, for example, if you have, let's say, that in work, okay, I need you to settle X amount of cases. Okay, what is the end goal? Settling X amount of cases. What do I need to do to settle X amount of cases? There's many, many pieces that we need to move, many things that need to happen for us to settle a case, right? So you go backwards. You start at the end and you go backwards. Okay, to settle, we need to send a demand, we need, medical treatment. Okay, and then you go, you know, even further. Okay, so we need to do this, so you create that plan based on what you need to at the end. So always start with the end in mind. For example, let's say that you want to be an actor. You want to be a Hollywood actor. That's your dream. What do you need to be an actor? Well, first you need to get acting classes, right? You need to learn how to act. Okay. Maybe get an agent, start auditioning, maybe move to LA. I don't know. Like whatever that is, you picture your goal, you picture what the end result is, and then you create that path to get there. So beginning with the end in mind means clarifying your goals and values to guide your actions. Develop a personal mission statement, a set of values and principles towards which you will direct your actions. Ensure that your actions do not contradict the guiding principles that you hold. Again, what we spoke about before, make sure that you understand what your core values are and align that with whatever you're doing. There's always people, and they annoy me so much when they say one thing and do something else. Yeah, don't be like that. So if you know your values, if you understand what your values are, make sure that everything you do aligns with those values. So beginning with the end in mind applies to businesses. Uh, Being a leader is about setting the strategic vision for an organization and asking, what are we trying to accomplish? Before we as individuals or organizations can start setting and achieving goals, we must be able to identify our values. This process may involve some rescripting to be able to assert our values. So what is rescripting? Prescripting is recognizing ineffective scripts written for you and changing those scripts by proactively writing new ones built on your values. So we all have this internal narrative, and we just need to rescript that. So identify your center. Whatever is at at the center of your life will be the source of your security, guidance, wisdom, and power. So you need to know what that is. What's at your center, at your core, to because this is going to be the source for everything else. Now we have a couple of examples. I'm not going to go through all, but basically, let's say if you are money centered, your personal worth is determined by your net worth. Profit is your decision making criteria. Let's say you are work centered. You tend to define yourself by your occupational role. You make your decisions based on the needs and expectations of your work. Let's say that you are church centered. Your security is based on church activity and the esteem in which you are held by those in authority or influence in the church. You find identity and security in religious labels and comparisons. So again, there's a bunch of examples as to what might be your center, but these are not optimal. So at the end of the day, we should try to be principle centered. So identify the timeless, unchanging principles by which you must live your life. This will give you the guidance that you need to align your behaviors with your beliefs and values. And the homework for this one is break down different roles in your life and list 5 goals for each. This can include personal, professional, or community roles, doesn't matter, but define what scares you. For example, let's say that you're afraid of public speaking. Let's say that you have to do a presentation in front of the whole management team and you have a fear of public speaking. So what you do is that you write down the worst case scenario, right? Like for your biggest fear, right? You what can go wrong? And then you can visualize how you will handle that situation. So for example, if I'm afraid of public speaking and I have to do a speak presentation, I would say, okay, what can go wrong? What's everything that can go wrong? Okay, I can make a mistake when I'm speaking. How would I handle that? Well, I will probably just keep going. All right. What can happen? What maybe I get asked a question I don't know the answer to. Okay, how can you prepare for that? Okay, I make a list of all the possible questions that apply to that presentation, and then I get the answers, and then I'm ready. Before what can go wrong? My PowerPoint can just poof, can disappear, and then what do I do? Okay, so how do you get ready for that? Maybe you print the notes on paper and you have them like a backup on your hand just in case you lose the PowerPoint. So you see what I'm saying? You create like all these things that can go wrong. You get ready, and then and then that's how you go prepared to that presentation, and that will help you with that fear of public speaking. And usually people that are very paranoid, that's always thinking what can go wrong, this is what they do. They usually, they think about the ending, how it's gonna end, like all the things that can go wrong. And that's why they're like all paranoid and they're like usually ready with everything that can go wrong. But not everybody sees it that way. So just FYI. So this is just pick one thing, whatever you fear. And again, it doesn't have to be work related. It could be on your personal life, but do this exercise because it's really good. And it would like give you a bigger understanding of that habit. Okay, so let's move on to habit number 3. Put first things first. So putting first things first is the practical execution of habit 1 and 2. You must be proactive and use your guiding principles to determine the most important activities in front of you and execute them accordingly. Be disciplined and manage your time. Determine important tasks and execute them. And prioritize important tasks over urgent but less important ones. So we talked about this in previous classes. It's all about priorities. You do not have a time management issue. You have a priority issue. So if you're good at prioritizing, if you put first things first, you can get your work done and you're not going to have an issue with your time. Now, in the past, I show you this diagram, very similar to this. It's the same concept that we covered before, and it basically helps you categorize those tasks. So I realized that a lot of people are not very good at prioritizing. So you have all these tasks, and when we say, okay, just do the most important first. Okay, but what is the most important? But remember, if you begin with the end in mind, which we just covered, right? You can see what are the most important tasks because you can see what are the tasks that are going to make the biggest impact on that ending goal that you have. So that's how you get to those priorities. Now, once you have the priorities, when you understand what the most important is, you do that first. First thing first. And this diagram, it helps you put this task or different things into the categories, and it helps you know what to tackle first. So again, we already covered this before, just going to go a little bit deeper, but basically in quadrant 1, which is what we call urgent and important, and this is basically when you're putting out fires, when you're being reactive, right? You're going to see activities like crisis, um, pressing problems, deadline-driven projects, and these tasks or these activities can consume you and lead to burnout. So if you're feeling burned out, it's probably because you're spending too much time on quadrant one, on doing things that are urgent and important. So these things are important. We need to address them. But you should not align your mission statement with putting out fires. This is not the way you should live your life. There are certain, in certain instances where you definitely have to do it. But you should not, this is not where you should be spending most of your time because again, you're going to get burned out. Now, quadrant two, which is the important and not urgent, this is where you should spend most of your time. This is gold. And the activities that you're going to see here are relationship building, recognizing the opportunities, and planning. Make big emphasis on the word planning. When you're planning, you're ahead of the game. That's when you feel the best. Think about, when do you feel better? When you like putting out fires and being super reactive and running around, or when you actually have the time to plan and set the time and you create a plan and then, like, doesn't that make you fulfilled? Like, doesn't that make you feel better? Like, oh, I did it. Like, I have a plan. I'm good. I'm okay. It's going to be fine. Well, non-urgent matters are at the heart of effective personal management. We know these are important, but often neglect them for more urgent matters. So this requires discipline to tackle and bolster your effectiveness. Again, most of your time should be spent in that quadrant. Now we have quadrant three, and the activities are interruptions, some calls, meetings, popular activities, and these tasks are not important, but urgent. And we spend most of our time reacting to matters that seem urgent when in reality, their perceived urgency is based on the priorities and expectations of others. This leads to short-term focus, feeling out of control, and shallow or broken relationships. This is when people come to your office, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I have a big problem. And then it's not that big of a problem, but it sounds urgent. But guess what? It's urgent to them, not to you. And we tend to spend a lot of time doing this, especially when you're in a leadership position. Everybody wants to come to your office. Everybody wants to check in with you, and everybody has an emergency. So you have to redirect. You have to make sure that you're delegating properly and that you are redirecting those people. And then we finally have quadrant four, and the activities here are basically trivial busy work, time wasters, pleasant activities, and these are things that are not important and not urgent. We said in the past that for these activities, you should delete them. However, even though these tasks are a waste of time, it's easy to pour energy into these trivial, unimportant things, but we deserve rest and pleasant activities. So it's not like fully neglect them because we also need to indulge a little bit once in a while. But the idea is that you must first prioritize activities aligned with your guiding principles. So it's not like, let's say you would like to watch Netflix, of course, that's a waste of time, but you still want to do things that you like, but you have to make sure that you prioritize your time. Again, this doesn't only applies to work, it applies to your personal life. How many times do you get home and you have a million things to do and you spend literally 2 hours in social media, just scrolling, and you lose track of time. And then, oh my God, it's time to go to bed. I didn't do any of the tasks that I was supposed to do. I didn't clean, I didn't cook, I didn't do anything. And now I feel like a failure. And I go to bed feeling like defeated, right? I mean, it happens to all of us. So, it doesn't mean don't scroll in social media, but maybe instead of 2 hours, just do 15 minutes and then set your priorities straight and do the most important things first. So, once again, this applies everywhere, personal life, professional life. Now, I love this quote by Stephen Covey. It says, the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. This is so good. Keep that in mind. Super important. So to focus on quadrant two, which is the most important one, we must learn to say no to other activities. Sometimes ones that seem urgent, we also need to be able to delegate effectively. Again, we've said it in the past. Part of being a leader, you need to effectively delegate. So those, super urgent and important tasks that, obviously somebody needs to do it, your ability as a leader to delegate those is super important. If you can delegate all those super high, important, urgent tasks, you're able to concentrate on quadrant two, which is planning, strategic vision, all of those things. So when we focus on quadrant two, it means we're thinking ahead, working on routes, and preventing crisis from happening in the first place. This helps us implement, and I don't know if you've seen this before, the Pareto principle, which is 80% of your results come from 20% of your time. So use your time wisely. Now, homework for this habit. Identify a quadrant two activity that you've been neglecting, write it down, and commit to implementing it. Create your time management matrix to start prioritizing. Estimate how much time you spend in each quadrant, then log your time over the 3 days. How accurate was your time? How much time do you spend in each quadrant? And, especially log how much time you spend in quadrant two, which is the most important one that you should be, which is the one where you plan and you get ready. Now, you're supposed to be using this already. Well, you're supposed to be using the quadrants to help you organize yourself. But if you are not, or maybe you tried it for a couple of days and you stop, then please do this homework for the next 3 days and see if it helps you out. So, public victory. Remember that we talk about private victory, public victory. So, habits 4 and 6 focus on cultivating successful interactions with others. You can only achieve public victory after private triumph. So the habits 1 and 3 enable to develop independence. And then the habits 4 and 6 aim to establish interdependent relationship where you can effectively work together to achieve common goals. So now we dive into habit number 4. Think win-win. All right, so there are 6 paradigms of human interaction. So win-win is that this paradigm is based on the belief that mutual benefit is the best approach to achieve a satisfactory outcome for all parties involved. So basically, we all win here. Now, win-lose is based on the belief that one person's gain is another person's loss. It is a competitive approach to human interaction when one party wins and the other one loses. Then you have lose-win, and this paradigm is based on the belief that putting the needs and desires of others before your own is the best way to achieve a satisfactory outcome. So this is the modern, And then you have lose-lose, which is based on the belief that when 2 or more parties disagree, no one wins and everyone loses. Then you have win, which is based on the belief that achieving personal success without considering the need and desires of others in the best way to approach human interaction. And finally, you have win-win or no deal. And this believes that if you cannot achieve a mutually satisfactory outcome, it is better to have no deal. It promotes finding a solution that benefits all parties involved or walking away. So we should always strive for win-win. This is the idea. So you have all the scenarios, all the paradigms of human interaction, but the one you should always be focusing on is win-win. So in win-lose and lose-win scenarios, one person gets what they want at the expense of another. This type of outcomes result in poor relationship health. Win-win or no deal is a backup. Having the option to walk away prevents us from manipulating others to achieve our goals. In solving for win-win, we must consider 2 factors, consideration and courage. So you can look at the chart. So when you have high consideration and high courage, you will always have win-win, which is what we want to strive for here. Now, there are 2 types of mentality. So we have an abundance mentality. And an abundance mentality is necessary to create win-win solutions. Abundance mentality is the belief that there is enough of everything to go around, including resources, opportunities, and success. People with abundance mentality tend to be more open-minded, flexible, and creative. And an abundance mentality fosters collaboration and cooperation, allowing people to work together and achieve success for all parties. Why is this important? Well, when you have an abundance mentality, you are not worried, you don't feel threatened. So in leadership, part of leadership is that you want to develop people around you. You're never going to be able to grow if you don't grow people, if you don't develop people around you. You're always going to be putting out fires on your own. It's going to be very hard for you to delegate because you don't have anybody competent to get the work done because you haven't spent the time to develop people. What I find, throughout the years, I've seen many people that get very threatened. They don't want to show others what they know. They don't want to teach what they know because they feel like somebody's going to come and take their job. This is because they don't have this abundance mentality. However, for example, I think it's obvious now that I love to teach. You know, I'm a frustrated teacher. I love to teach. Everything I know, I want to teach somebody else. Why? Because I know the chair is big enough for everybody to sit. I know there's a lot of opportunities here. I know that probably the jobs that we're going to have or the positions that we're going to have 3 years from now don't even exist today. So I don't need to go over anybody to be successful. I don't need to get anybody out of the way to be successful because there's so many opportunities here. Now, I believe that I think like that because I have that abundance mentality. But if you don't think like that, it's probably because you have a scarcity mentality. And this is the belief that there's a limited amount of everything, and one person's success must come at the expense of another. So most people operate with this mentality, and it leads to feeling envy, unhappiness, and victimhood. A scarcity mentality limits a person's ability to see opportunities and makes solving for win-win scenarios nearly impossible. So again, when you have this type of mentality, if you don't shift your paradigm, it's going to be very hard for you to make it into a leadership role because this kind of goes against everything that a leader stands for. And I mean, I understand the scarcity mentality. In my case, again, I'm going to make a food example. I grew up in Cuba where food was very scarce. Like I didn't have food. Like, for example, ice cream. I think that I could count with this hand how many times I ate ice cream in the 12 years I lived in Cuba. So when I came here, I had that scarcity mentality when it came to food. So I had a very unhealthy relationship with food because of that. Because in my mind, even though I now had all this food available to me, I still had the mentality that I was living in a third world country where there was no food. And so I would overeat because in my mind, food will go away. So I have to, oh my God, this is good. So I have to eat it all. I have to make the most of it because I might not have it tomorrow. Okay, so that mentality, again, that's not a healthy mentality. And so I had to do a paradigm shift. I had to train my mind to say, listen, if you're hungry, you can go to a supermarket and get food anytime you want. So you're gonna be fine. Same thing when it comes to our mentality here in the workspace. You have to make that shift and start thinking with that abundance mentality so you can start having this win-win uh, s- uh, interactions with people. As a team, you wanna, when you are dealing with in the company, when you're dealing with another team, you hopefully the idea is to get to a point where you both getting something out of the situation, where you're not trying to just get what you want at the expense of the other team. So whenever we do a changing process where maybe a team has to do a little bit more work, there has to be some sort of compromise where we all win. When the company benefits and when both teams are winning by making these changes. So this comes from that win-win mentality and abundance mentality. Now, homework for this. Consider an upcoming interaction where you attempt to reach an agreement or solution. Write down a list of what the other person is looking for and consider how you can meet those needs. Identify 3 important relationships in your life and consider their balance. Do you give more than you take? Write down 10 ways to give more than you take in each relationship. And finally, identify your interaction tendencies and how they affect others. Are they win-lose? Can you identify the source of that approach? Determine whether or not your approach serves you well in your relationship. All right, and this is my favorite. Number 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Basically, this is about communication. So this habit is all about communication. This is the reason I read this book, because of this habit, because at the center of most problems, we always have communication issues. Think about that, especially when you're dealing with people. Whenever there's more than one person, there's going to be conflict. And the easiest way to have conflict is when there's gaps in communication. So this habit is extremely important for your teams and for you as a leader. And habit 5 means that you must listen actively and empathetically before communicating your own views. Listen with the intent to understand, not to respond. In doing so, you can cultivate trust and respect with others. We do this all the time. We are listening to the other person, not to really understand where they're coming from, but like already we have like 3 statements in our head, like waiting for them to finish to go, like bam, bam, bam. Well, you said this, but this is what I think. So we are listening not with the idea to understand, but because we want to basically respond. And in that case, you're not really listening. And then seeking to understand requires being open minded and non judgmental and avoiding imposing your biases and assumptions on others. The result is to improve communication, deeper relationships, and more effective collaboration. Again, when we communicate, we tend to impose, like we tend to use our biases, what we would do, what we would say. So we kind of translate what the person is doing. We use that lens that we talked about, right? And we look through that lens. And so we let our biases dictate what the other person is saying. So we all create stories in our head. Somebody is telling us something, and in your mind, it's like, well, she's saying this, but what she really means is X, Y, and Z. We all do this. And so the idea is to get away from that so we can have a real communication, an effective communication. Now, when you're communicating, and this is really interesting, in communication, 40% of your communication, it's about the tone or the feeling. 53% is the body language, and only 7% is words. And again, why do I say this is interesting? Because it happens all the time. Let's say we have a client that is upset, didn't like the way the case manager spoke to them. And then I go to the case manager and I say, hey, what happened with this client? I don't know. I said everything perfectly. I mean, I don't know what else I could say. And what people don't understand is you can say everything perfectly, but it's the tone you use, your body language, does most of the conveying. So it's not what you say, it's how we say it. And again, this is a perfect example of that. Only 7%. Your words only account for 7%. So you have to really work on your delivery, on how you say things. Now, reflective listening is a technique that talks about practicing to understand others' perspective. In reflective listening, you paraphrase the other person's message and you check for accuracy to ensure that you understand their perspective correctly. So it's like, so what you mean to say is blah 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 blah. So so it seems like you feel blah 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 blah, something like that. Now we have autobiographical listening, and this is the worst type of listening. And I am sad to say that I do this all the time, and I hate it because I know I should not. None of us should do it, and most of us do it, and it's terrible. And it's when you're listening with your perspective in mind. And when you do this, you tend to respond like this. You evaluate, so you agree or disagree with what is said. You probe, you ask questions from our frame of reference. We advise, we give counsel based on our own experience, and we interpret. We try to determine the person's motives and behavior based on our motives and behavior. And again, this is terrible. And I would say one of the worst is the advice. We tend to give advice like, I know what you mean because this happened to me. Yes. Oh yes, I know what you mean because I went through the same thing. Like again, we all do it and it's just terrible. You do not have an effective conversation like that. Instead, we need to have for effective communication, we need to have empathetic listening. And with empathetic listening, you have to reflect what a person says in your own words. So again, when we talk about reflecting and paraphrasing, this is what it looks like. When somebody tells you, I have problem with my time management, it sounds like what I would say is, it sounds like you're saying that you have issues prioritizing your tasks. When you do that, the person will correct you if you're making an inaccurate statement. But at least you're not saying, oh, so you're not prioritizing tasks right. You see the difference? When you make a statement like that, you're making like a black and white statement, like this is what it is. Instead, when you say, it sounds like you're having trouble um, prioritizing your task effectively, the person can say, yes, yes, you're right, or no, 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 that's not what it is. Oh, okay. So you see, like you open that window for to get corrected if what you're saying is not what the other person meant. So you can also say, what I think you're saying is blah. Am I understanding you correctly? So when you talk this way, again, you are trying to understand what the other person is saying, but you're not making definitive statements. This helps with the communication. Now, the homework for this habit. Next time you watch two people communicate, cover your ears and just watch. What emotions are they sharing that might not come across through the words alone? For example, was one person or the other more interested in the conversation? And then write down what you notice. And then read your presentations in empathy. Begin by understanding the audience point of view, what problems they're facing, how is what you're about to say offering a solution to the problems. Now, the one example I want to give you about this habit uh, is again, I told you that the reason I read this book is because of this habit, because I wanted to communicate better. So there was this manager that I really couldn't communicate with her. Like we had issues communicating. And I was like, is it me? Is it her? Like what's going on? So I realized that I have to put myself on her shoes, right? We have to be empathetic. We have to move away from our biases, what we think, the way we interpret things. And I said, okay, this is not working for me. So let me try this other way. So I started thinking, okay, so what when I say certain things that bother her, what is she really coming from? Why she feels this way? And so when I put myself on her shoes, I realized that she wasn't trying to make my life harder. It's just that she also has a lens, right? Just like I have mine. And she didn't like when I was too strong. She felt like I was disrespecting her. So I just had to change my mindset. And I said, okay, she doesn't like that. Why am I keep communicating this way when I know I'm not getting through? So when I talk to her, I'm gonna try to be less confrontational. I know that to me it's normal and it doesn't mean anything. There's nothing behind it, but she doesn't see it that way. So if I want to effectively communicate, I'm going to communicate the way that she would like to be communicated. Because the idea here, you need to understand the person first, where they're coming from, their biases, how they communicate, and then you're going to be understood. The problem is that we always wanted to be understood first, and that's not how it works. You're like, this is my personality. You should know I don't mean any harm. You should know I'm like this, right? You're trying to put yourself first. You want to be understood first. And that's the problem when we're communicating. Remove yourself from the equation. You come second. You put the other person's feelings and needs first. You try to understand the person first, and then, and only then, they can understand you. You see how it works? So again, this read the book. I feel like I don't have time to spend more, on this habit, which is a shame because there's so much information. There's a lot of tools that you can use, and there's a lot of examples that the book gives you. So I really recommend you to read it. If you don't have time to read the whole book, read only this one, like this habit 5. Just go to the book and read habit 5. I'm telling you, it's gonna change your life. So habit number 6, we're almost done. Synergize. The synergized habit emphasizes the power of collaboration and encourages us to look for opportunities to work together to create outcomes greater than the sum of their parts. Key to synergy and collaboration is valuing people's differences and seeking ways to contribute to combine strengths to reach more significant outcomes than what could achieve alone. So again, this is basically working as a team. We want to work as a team, we want to collaborate. Two heads think better than one. Now, recognize and appreciate the unique abilities, experiences, and perspective of others. Seek to combine people's different strengths to achieve collaborative success. Look for solutions that go beyond simply compromising between two opposing views. Find ways to create new solutions that addresses everyone's needs. Listen to understand. We must empathetically listen to understand and value others' differences. Listen to understand, not to respond. Be open to feedback, really important. We have a whole class on feedback. Welcome feedback from others without involving your ego. Use feedback to improve your ideas and actions. You should not see this as a threat. You should see this as an opportunity to grow. View relationship with trust and respect. Trust and respect are essential for achieving synergetic outcomes. Strive for honesty and openness as the foundation of your relationships. Create an environment where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas, exchanging feedback, and collaborating. Now, the homework for this, so make a list of people who irritate you. That's not going to be hard. How are their views different from yours? Put yourself in their shoes. Imagine how it feels to them. Next time you disagree with one of those people, try to understand their concern and why they disagree. The better you can understand them, the easier it will be to change their mind or yours. Make a list of people with whom you get along well, how their views are different. Then write down a situation where you had excellent teamwork and synergy, and then think why. What conditions were met to reach synergy? How can you create those conditions again? So this forces you to actually, that thought process. Okay, I don't like this. What can I do better? And then I really like this. What worked for me? Why do I like this? And that can help you replicate it in the future. Again, working as a team is key to accomplish any vision for a company. If you're a leader, you have to make sure that you are encouraging your people to work in a team environment. So synergy is very important. And then finally, number 7, and very important, sharpen the saw. So sharpening the saw refers to the consistent and intentional practice of enhancing personal growth, focusing on activities that rejuvenate and revitalize our energy. This leads to a joyful, well-rounded, and efficient person. We often become absorbed in our tasks and duties, overlooking the importance of self-care. To maintain our effectiveness, it's crucial to take time to sharpen our saw. In essence, prioritizing our well-being is vital. Without being healthy and content ourselves, we cannot effectively assist others. If you know me, I know I play a big emphasis, I'm very, like with work, I'm very disciplined and I'm very determined and, I meet my deadlines and all of that, but I carve out time for me. I love to travel. I need this. If I don't travel, I get burned out and then my brain doesn't work. So I need to find time to exercise sometimes, to do things that I like, things that bring me joy. Because work all the time, or let's say if you're at home and you're a mom, kids, husband all the time. Like when you focus all your energy in one thing and you don't have time for yourself, you're gonna be unhappy and you're gonna be burned out all the time. And of course, you're gonna blame it on work and you're gonna blame it on this and you're gonna blame it on that, but you should be blaming it on you because you have the power to do that. You are responsible to take control and carve out that time for you. So we have different types. We have physical renewal, and basically, this is about obviously your health, your vitality, all of that. And so you have exercising, eating healthy, staying hydrated, spending time in nature, getting enough sleep. Then you have mental renewal. Then, meditation, reading books, learning new things, pursuing hobbies and interests, playing an instrument, watching a documentary. Then you have the spiritual renewal. And then you have meditation, prayer, volunteering, journaling, self reflection, silence and gratitude, fasting. You have the social or emotional renewal. And basically, this is spending time with loved ones, hanging out with friends, going to concert, having a meaningful conversation, practicing empathy, hosting a dinner party, distancing ourselves from toxic people, very important. And so, pretty much, we put emphasis on some of these more than others because it all depends what you value the most, what's most important to you. So, but you should be whatever you value the most, whatever is most important to you, you should be paying attention to that and finding that time for yourself to practice some of these things. And so homework for sharpening the saw. List renewal activities you enjoy and sort them accordingly to the above categories. Make it a goal to do one renewal activity from each category per week. Identify the essential areas of renewal for your personality. For example, some people are extroverted and might need to focus more on social renewal, where other people might need to prioritize physical renewal over the rest. So at the end of the day, guys, everything that we've learned is so cool, but if you're not taking care of your body, if you're not taking care of your mind, and you're not taking care of yourself, it's going to be really hard for you to perform in these other areas. And when people talk about work-life balance, again, people tend to blame work or external factors. I think we just learned today that you should not be blaming external factors. So just make a plan. That's why it's so important to be quadrant two. You plan. If you plan, you can say, I'm going to dedicate X amount of time to this task. I'm going to dedicate X amount of time, let's say, to exercising. So every time after work, I'm going to exercise for an hour, but you have to be very disciplined about what you want and then execute it. And that's it for today. I'm out of breath. I was trying, it's a lot. It's a lot. Again, you need to read the book. I was trying to go over as much as I could. I know I spent more time in some than others. At the end, they're all equally important. I have my favorites, of course, but you should definitely read the book to get more insight. Before we go, because we have 1 minute left, do you guys have a question? Any doubts? You guys have a lot of homework. Okay, all right. So again, let's try to put this into practice. This is meaningless if you guys don't practice it. And I want to see, especially with number 5, um, seek to understand, then be understood. I want to see you guys practice that a lot. So whenever you're getting ready to have a conversation or an interaction with somebody, please have that in mind. Try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Try to see from their perspective, and then go from there. And then let me know how that went. Okay? But really, do the homework. You can start with the habits that maybe that you struggle the most or that you like the most first, but try to complete all of it. Okay? Okay, bye. Bye.